When my two oldest boys were younger, they used to attend half-day preschool and kindergarten at the synagogue where I worked, Temple Sinai in Toronto. I would drive them home for lunch before taking them to their afternoon programs. On one such day, it happened to be my older son Reuben's 6th birthday. My younger son, Effie, who was 4 years old, was very excited for his big brother. "Aren't you excited, Reuben? You're 6 now. You need 2 hands to count your age now," as he demonstrated with his 2 little hands. So excited for his big brother. And Reuben responded, "Nah, it just means I'm 1 year closer to dying." Yeah. Beyond demonstrating the stark difference between my 2 boys, this story is pretty spot on when we think what we are doing today. Traditionally, Yom Kippur is a rehearsal for death. Each one of us is a year closer to dying than we were last year, no matter how many hands and fingers and toes we need to count our age. And so, we dress in white, like the burial shrouds. We don't eat or drink. We don't shower or anoint ourselves with perfumes. We don't engage in sexual activity. We remove our fancy jewelry and instead choose to dress simply, right down to our shoes. It's strange and almost uncharacteristic of Judaism to have such a holiday. We're usually so life-affirming. Any law may be suspended in order to save a life. Pikuach nefesh, the saving of life, takes precedence over everything. We say l'chaim, to life, over every glass of wine. We celebrate and thank God for every milestone we meet with blessings of shehechianu and acts of tzedakah. But on Yom Kippur, we confront death. We rehearse it. We envision what life will be like for others when we are gone. We imagine how we will be remembered. We confront that image and evaluate what we need to change so that one day when that time comes, maybe a long time from now, we are remembered for good. Because death is a final decree. Or is it? Did you know that belief in resurrection of the dead is actually a required belief in Judaism? That's right. We do have requirements in the belief department, at least according to some of our classical rabbis. Now, mostly, with the exception of Maimonides, the Jewish community holds that those who behave like Jews and perform the mitzvot, the commandments, even if they have deviant ideas, are still Jews and worthy of a place in our community. There is one notable exception, Techiyat HaMeitim, the belief in the physical resurrection of the dead. That's right. Have you ever read the translations of what we're praying? Jews are supposed to believe that in the end time, even every decomposed body will be reconstituted and will come back onto earth once again. Picture the zombie apocalypse, but much happier and less scary. The Mishnah insists that this belief is required by any person who is to have a place in the world to come. It's so central to our faith, in fact, that the rabbis made it the subject of the second blessing of the Amidah, and we recite it 3 times a day. Do you find physical resurrection hard to believe? So do I. In fact, the Reform movement excised this notion from its liturgy altogether way back in the 19th century, except, interestingly, for one service in its Yom Kippur prayer book, because of this rehearsal for death imagery. But normally, the words Mechayeh HaMeitim, give life to the dead, in Reform prayer books, is replaced with Mechayeh HaKol, gives life to all. All still encompasses the dead, of course, but it's not so apparent that that's what's intended. The Reform prayer book is reflecting what most people probably feel, a skepticism. We tend to trust what we've seen and experienced, and I don't know about you, but I've never witnessed a resurrection. The Torah also doesn't know about resurrection. There's no mention of it in the entire 5 books of Moses. In fact, Moses himself probably hadn't thought of the idea. The closest we come is in 1 Samuel in the text of Hannah's prayer as she reaches out to God in despair. She says, Adonai memit mechaye morid she'ol vaya'al. The Eternal One deals death and gives life, casts down into Sheol and raises up. Sheol is the biblical understanding of where dead people go and is often mistranslated as hell. It's more like a holding room. We read this passage in our Haftarah for Rosh Hashanah. The rabbis, though, felt that belief in resurrection was so important that it ought to be in the Torah, so they actually read it into the Torah. They built a creative midrash to find hints of resurrection in the Torah. Pages and pages of Talmud Sanhedrin are devoted to these far-fetched attempts. One of the best reads, Rabbi Simai, there is no passage in the Torah that lacks the proof of resurrection, but we lack the power to expound it. In other words, the doctrine of Techiyat HaMeitim is everywhere in the Torah. Not only the doctrine, but actual proof. We're just not astute enough to recognize it. It's right there, below the surface. What our rabbis want us to envision is what's referred to in the scholarly community as eschatology, the so-called end times. That is what they believe is under the surface in all of Torah. Eschatological visions of the end times, usually describe a perfect world, heaven on earth. Everything that is broken is repaired, all legal disputes are resolved, the lion lies down with the lamb, and swords are beaten into plowshares. It's hard to believe in such a world, no doubt. But our rabbis ask us to imagine such a place, to look forward to a peaceful world, because maybe if we believe that is possible, it will become possible, or at least open us up to new possibilities. There are several types of religious teachings. First, there's history. We learn about what was, what people did, what they believed, etc. Second, there are theological beliefs that we have since moved past. We might even call them false today. Maybe they were true at one time, but they no longer hold as mainstream beliefs. The final category are those traditions or beliefs that are meant to be understood metaphorically. They often appear as poems, myths, stories, or songs, and they transmit truths within them, even if they themselves are not literally true. I think this belief in Techiyat HaMeitim falls into this third category. Of course, it makes no sense as fact, but we are called upon to imagine that it is. This dogma affirms that being life-focused ultimately wins out. Order prevails over chaos, and there is meaning beyond the grave. Techiyat HaMeitim is a powerful notion on the metaphorical level. Sometimes we feel that we are beyond despair. Maybe we've lost a loved one without whom we feel we cannot live. Maybe we are depressed, ill, or feel hopeless when we look at our life's prospects and possibilities. Praying, Baruch atah mechayeh hameitim, blessed are you who gives life to the dead, is about ourselves. If the esteemed rabbis of old believed that God has the power to revive the dead, then certainly God has the power to give me and each one of us hope, renewed hope, to revive our souls, to help us find meaning in life once again. Each one of us has the power to revive ourselves, to renew our resolve, to reignite the spark within us. I'm not a very good gardener. I definitely do not have a green thumb. Recently, I decided to transplant my basil from my garden, which is a trek away from my kitchen, and place it in a pot near the back door. I even bought a special shelving unit with a weather cover to keep it safe. Needless to say, my basil died. I think it suffocated inside that weather shield. Or maybe it dried out from lack of watering, who's to say? That weather shield apparently also guards against the rain watering it automatically. Well, I wrote it off and resolved to have to buy my basil from the grocery store once again. But suddenly, I noticed that the leaves were returning to a healthy green. It seems that my daughter watered the plant. Why did she do it? I don't know. The plant looked completely finished to me. What made her have hope that it could live? I thought it was beyond help. but she gave it some water, the sun did its job, and we have fresh basil once again. Regeneration is possible. Growth and life are possible. The point of death is not so clear-cut, and the line between death and life is perhaps not a straight one, but a circle, each one leading to the other in an infinite loop. The rabbis also gave metaphorical meanings to Techiyat HaMeitim. In fact, the Shulchan Aruch, the most extensive code of Jewish law, instructs us to recite Baruch Atah Mechayeh HaMeitim when we are reunited with a dear friend or family member after 12 or more months. After having no contact for so long, it is as if this person has risen from the dead. For us, they have. I imagine some of us are feeling that way after finally seeing our family members, dear friends, or seeing fellow community members in this holy space after over a year. If you are at a loss for words, there they are. Baruch Atah Mechayeh HaMeitim. The Hasidic commentary, Likutei HaTorah, says, aliveness comes through love between friends, through the light they give one another. When one friend sees the other, they are inspired like the revival of the dead. Indeed, we give life to one another. There's a story about an auctioneer who is desperately trying to auction off a scarred and battered old violin. The bidding starts with a mere $10 and is about to be closed at $50. Suddenly, at the last moment before the gavel falls, an older man shuffles forward from the back of the room and begins to play. And the most beautiful music pours forth from that instrument. When the bidding finally closes, the violin has sold for $3,000. When we pay attention to that which seems scarred or battered within us, we can give it new life. We can find out that there is so much more hidden within, even if the possibilities seem grim. That is Techiyat HaMeitim, giving life to the dead, reviving the soul. We have been scarred and battered this year. So much has been taken from us. Time with loved ones, travel plans, weddings, graduations, comforting each other at funerals, celebrating holidays, births, being at a hospital bedside, being in school, having a proper frosh week. The list goes on and on. Now, we are beginning to live again, to find safe ways to be together, and to bring life into our midst once again. Baruch Atah Mechayeh HaMeitim. Before he died, Reb Zalman made an unusual request. He knew that once he died, the Chaver Kadisha would perform the rituals of the Tahara, the purification of the body, where they would wash him, say the appropriate blessings, and dress his body in white linen shrouds in preparation for burial. He wanted to experience that while he was alive, so that his neshama, his soul, would be prepared for what was coming. So he asked them to perform the rituals as though he were dead. He closed his eyes and let himself be tended to and prayed over and cared for in that unique way. Can you imagine what that would be like? To lie still, as though your soul had already departed your body, and submit without flinching and without fear to your community's tender care? Can you imagine wanting that kind of dress rehearsal for your own death? Today is our dress rehearsal. But the good news is that at the end of the day, we also get a dress rehearsal for resurrection, Techiyat HaMeitim. As our stomachs are rumbling and we neglect the physical needs of our bodies, we have the opportunity to think about our souls, to consider what gives us life, what sustains us, and what needs more attention so that we can become that beautiful music once again. And we have a meaningful day of doing just that.